Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event in the Climate Crisis Dialogue Series, sponsored by the Vancouver Unitarians and the Multi-Faith Action Society of British Columbia. My name is John Boyle, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees here at the Vancouver Unitarians. We acknowledge that our campus at the corner of 49th and Oak in Vancouver is located on the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam people. We deeply appreciate the wisdom that guided Indigenous stewardship of these lands for millennia before settlement by others, and recognize the damage done to them and their lands by that settlement. We are actively committed to working with Indigenous peoples as allies in finding a better way forward to a just and sustainable future for us all. Now, every day, and especially in this past year or so in British Columbia, we're reminded that we're in a climate crisis. The wildfires, the droughts, the atmospheric rivers, the floods, it's inescapable. And so the purpose of this dialogue series is to support us and really in finding the individual and collective strength to clearly face the truth about this crisis, in mourning the damage being done to our blue planet, and inspiring ourselves and others to action. Our speakers are drawn from diverse faith and spiritual traditions, including those of Indigenous peoples. They speak to how these traditions and practices and the values they represent help them contest with this climate emergency. In this way, we hope that they will help you and me engage more effectively with the crisis and create our way forward to a sustainable future for ourselves and our families, our communities, our nation, and for the health of our loved ones and our planet. Tonight we welcome Fred Bass to offer his perspectives on climate activism, based primarily on his Jewish, Quaker, and Buddhist backgrounds, but I suspect he's going to bring in some other themes too, but we'll see. Anyway, and now over to our moderators.
Thank you, John, and good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Clegg, co-host this evening with John. Our regular co-host, Olivia Hall, is COVIDized, as unfortunately are a fair number of people in our Unitarian Church office today. So we wish them well. I would like to acknowledge, nonetheless, the show goes on, and so therefore thank you to the volunteers behind the scenes and in front of the scenes who are making this series possible, and the staff. It couldn't happen without them. Just to let you know that the final presentation in this stage of the series will be in June, and the speaker will be presenting an Ismaili Muslim perspective, and it's Mr. Samir Merchant. That will be in June the 8th to be exact. Well, why this series? There's a great deal that is being debated, talked about with respect to the climate crisis. It's information overload. What facts are real, what facts are not. There's just a tremendous turbulence in the field of trying to get a hold of it. And that breeds a great deal of anxiety. It can, about getting a fix on what can we do, what do we pay attention to, and how do we respond. And it occurred to us here at the Unitarian Church that this raises questions of personal resilience, of psychological health and well-being, and therefore we wondered out loud, what can we as Unitarians bring to this dimension of faith, spirituality, and managing the crisis, the climate crisis, personally, psychologically, and collectively as a society. It also made sense for us to be asking, well, what are the other faiths out there and beliefs doing and experiencing? So this series has been covering a number of those faiths with excellent presentations as people struggle to come to terms with it personally, even as they represent their faiths. The challenge to both psychological well-being and the challenge to be meaningfully engaged, to feel that you're actually doing something about it, and the fulfillment that comes about that. So that's the reason for this series, and I'm delighted tonight that Dr. Fred Bass is here to make a presentation, and I'm going to give it back to John just to give a more formal introduction to Fred himself, and we will. No, I have to pause at this point. I better proceed, explain the procedure. Sorry. It is interactive, so if there are questions from anyone who's here this evening of Fred or points they would like to make, you're welcome to write that down, pass it to John or myself, and then that individual will be invited to come up on stage and talk with Fred. And in addition to that, of course, we have a chat line where viewers, listeners can write in your questions, and they'll be picked up here and written down and brought up to us on stage to ask Fred as well. And between us, John and I also have an endless supply of questions we want to make. We've been wanting to get at Fred for a very long time. And he's the guy that we're looking for some spirited discussion tonight. So, John, I'll leave it to you now to introduce Fred. Again, thank you.
I'll do it from here, Kristen. So I have it on 100% reliable authority that about a century ago, Fred Bass's Orthodox Jewish grandparents left Lithuania, Belarus, and Hungary for New York. Fred was born there and studied medicine and eventually focused on epidemiology and preventive medicine as they applied to the pandemic of tobacco addiction. In 1975, he migrated from the US to join the Vancouver Health Department. For 17 years, he worked with the BC Medical Association on tobacco addiction in BC and across Canada, promoting both clinical and policy interventions. Concerns about global warming and social justice led Fred to serve 2 terms on Vancouver City Council. And over the decades, he has joined many demonstrations. In fact, he's a regular. We keep bumping into them lately, haven't we? Pipeline protests at Burnaby Mountain, arrested in 2014 and arrested for blocking a coal train in White Rock. Fred now gives workshops to help people face ecological collapse. With his partner Roma, Fred enjoys his semi-blended families of children and grandchildren, his political and non-political friends, the food of Vancouver, walking and bicycle commuting, traversing BC's beautiful terrain, Sunday spiritual adventures with the Quakers, Wednesday spiritual adventures with the Soto Zen community of Mountain Range Zen. And he loves the music of Mozart, classic guitar, and Brazilian choro. All right. So Fred, welcome, and just step up to the podium and
John, thank you very much.
tell us what you have to say.
Okay. So let me gather my things here. I do not love masks. Okay. Nice to breathe. And I have my glasses here. So, to begin. So let's offer some gratitude to the Coast Salish people and all the creatures that have contributed to the ecosystems of this region. And thank you, audience, for coming here tonight, and for those who came via the internet. And thank you, John Boyle, Olivia Hall, who is not here, and Michael Clegg for inviting me. Thank you. So tonight, I'm going to share with you the great value I find in the wisdom I've gained from Judaism, Agnosticism, Quaker ways, and Zen Buddhism. This wisdom helps me to make sense of our challenging world and suggests ways for me to keep going in these very difficult times. Now, I must give you a warning, and that is that I will not represent any of these very well. This is a personal story that I was asked to deliver, and I'll give you my personal story. Okay. I'll begin with a brief story of my life, 4 key life events. Next, what I've learned from Judaism, Agnosticism, Quakers, and Zen Buddhism. And I'll close with my current practices and some suggestions, some recommendations to you. I was born in New York City 87 years ago. Both my parents were New York City school teachers. So it was no accident that I've had a lot of schooling. In 1975, after training and work in medicine and public health, and the US Army, I came to Canada with my young family to join the Vancouver Health Department. Here, my work eventually focused on the global, manufactured, and marketed pandemic of cigarette addiction and the illnesses it produces. And my work addressed how healthcare could counter that pandemic. Today, my focus is the climate, ecological, social crisis, which is also a manufactured and marketed pandemic. As you heard, my grandparents were Orthodox Jews from Eastern Europe. My parents held an agnostic faith in science. In college, I first encountered the Quakers in a Quaker work project in Quaker, Alaska. And in 2014, in the modest mountain range Zen location on Wall Street, I attended a weekend course, first time I was ever there, called Meditation for Activists. In 2016, my son Ben gave me a copy of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki. I read it slowly, carefully, 10 times, meditating each time. It's the only book I've ever read more than once, I think. And in 2018, I began attending Mountain Range Zen regularly on Wednesdays and continuing with Quakers on Sundays. I want to tell you about 4 life-changing events for me. Age 7, 2 hours after I saw my first Tyrannosaurus skeleton. It was suspended from the ceiling, made it more impressive, at the New York Museum of Natural History, a Tyrannosaurus skeleton. My grandfather said to me, after we traveled from Manhattan to the Bronx, my grandfather said to me, "No, there were never dinosaurs. God created the earth." If he had stabbed me with a fork, it would have been nicer. And for decades after that, when I heard the word God, it was a troubling word. Age 10. It was 1945. It was towards the end of the Second World War in Europe. One day in the New York newspaper that my father read, I saw an article about Nazi concentration camps. I realized in those days that followed that had my grandparents not emigrated from Europe to the United States many years before, that I would have been in a concentration camp and that likely exterminated in a gas chamber. In subsequent weeks after reading that article, I mentally divided my 5th grade class into those who would push the gas chamber button and those who wouldn't. And over the next few years, after reading that article, I determined for myself that if I ever found myself in an extermination situation, I would not go quietly. And then, 7 decades later, in 2014, I visited a concentration camp for the first time in the town of Terezin, north of Prague. In the Ghetto Museum was a picture of a young boy who died in Auschwitz. His name was František Bass. My name is Frederick Bass. So I think the decision I made at age 10 was a good one. Third life-changing event. During my public health training, I learned how a population approach, epidemiology, can reveal what individual case-by-case approaches miss. My doctoral research assessed the impact of cigarette smoking on the use of healthcare services. A global pandemic of illness was being spread by the manufacturing and marketing of cigarettes. In time, society has gained some control over that pandemic. Fourth life-changing event. In 1989, I was a member of the City of Vancouver's Clouds of Change Task Force, which addressed global warming. I saw the rapid growth of atmospheric carbon dioxide from 1950 swooping up to 1980. I learned how serious its implications might be. The CO2 curve was the scariest scientific information I had ever seen, and it still is. What to do? My partner, Roma, encouraged me to run for city council. I did. 3 years later, managed to get elected and focused on transportation, thinking that that would be a strategic way to approach cutting back on CO2. But sadly, our species has failed to control fossil fuel use. In my view, Canada has become, in fact, a petro-state, a nation whose economy and governance depends, or is at least strongly tied, to fossil fuel production. The uncontrolled use of fossil fuels has created catastrophe for life on Earth. We are speeding to global disaster. So how do my spiritual traditions help me face catastrophe? I'll go through the four of them. Judaism. Despite its perverse or maybe persistent interest in God and its use of Hebrew, which I don't understand, some Orthodox Jewish values have become a deep part of me. One, that the world and its creatures operate according to laws, maybe not the laws of God, but definitely the laws of nature. That we have a responsibility to be ethical and to contribute to the community. That study and scholarship are important, and that belonging to a minority group is okay, although hazardous. Agnosticism. If the existence of God is not knowable without good evidence, then looking for evidence is a good basis for knowing things. And also, it's okay to be unsure of things. Furthermore, even without faith in God, I could be deeply connected to things, to my family, to sports, to community, to fishing, to Boy Scouts, to sports. And later in my clinical training, the approach to counseling called transactional analysis provided a very strong basis for seeing people as inherently okay, not inclined towards sin or evil, but inherently okay. That's something that's shared with Unitarians, with Quakers, and certainly with most Buddhists. the Quakers, who are formerly known as the Religious Society of Friends. They practice a very simple, friendly form of worship, which I can summarize in a few sentences. Quaker meetings are an hour of silence, except occasionally when a person feels led to speak their truth out of the silence. So truth for Quakers comes out of silence. There's no Quaker creed, but there is this general theme that there is that of God in every person. And in the last decade, in things beyond people too. 6 words summarize Quaker values. Quakers call them testimonies, Quaker testimonies. And they spell out spices, which makes it very easy for me to remember. Simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. I'll say them again. Spices. Simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, stewardship. On to Soto Zen Buddhism. Since Quakers have not much to say about the universe or about the specifics of how to practice silence, I was highly susceptible to the following 6 ideas of Soto Zen Buddhism, which I'll spell out one by one. Now, let me say that what follows now is more physics and psychology and philosophy than religion. So anybody, as far as I can see, of any religion could indulge in a bit of this. It's distilled wisdom. 1, everything is connected. I deeply value the feeling of being connected to everything. And I must say, I take the word Unitarian more seriously now. That does kind of imply that everything is connected. All is connected. The earth, its creatures, all life, the air, the mountains, the sea, you and me, our inner and outer experience. Connected human beings have solved many problems, and connected they tend to thrive. In North America, that's often called teamwork. As the COVID pandemic has shown, human beings crave connection with one another. Buddhism recognizes the human group that gathers, the Sangha, to be a treasure. When we divide into opposing groups, we can cause serious trouble. War, discrimination, exploitation, extinction. Also, Zen has little use for dualistic thinking. Dualism is thinking about things by dividing them into this and that separate categories. Friend, enemy, human, animal, natural, artificial, etc. Now, ideas and language and symbols are, of course, useful. They help us deal with our world. But the cost of not seeing the whole, the cost of not seeing the common threads, can be devastating, can be fatal. Number 2, everything changes. Everything's connected and everything changes. Hoping that things will stay the same doesn't work. Everything evolves or devolves, whether it's an asteroid, a nation, an ecosystem, or a human body. The Hubble telescope has shown, at least it's shown to me, that the universe consists of swirls of matter in the midst of emptiness. Just within my lifetime, what seemed a peaceful post-World War period has turned into an unprecedented series of ecological and social emergencies. So this world has changed and is changing. I too will change. I'll die and be recycled, just like the chunks of earth that formed me. 3, Buddhist idea number 3, the practice of meditation is irreplaceable. It calms, strengthens, renews, and educates. Meditation, by training oneself to allow thoughts to pass, helps to let go of harmful attachment. Meditation strengthens the not knowing mind and helps prepare the mind for whatever is out there and whatever is coming next. It helps. It doesn't guarantee anything. Meditation's focus on the body and on breathing is recognition of life itself. Meditation is an embodied venture into the nothingness of the universe. Four, Soto Zen and meditation have helped me recognize that all language is limited, conditioned by history, culture, recent experience, and much more. So when I think, I am using a limited form of language. And when I contradict myself, I may actually be clarifying the situation. I've come to the point where I'm suspicious of people who don't contradict themselves. 5, Buddhism's 3 splendid virtues are compassion for those who suffer, joy, and serenity. They merit continuous practice for the world, for others, and for oneself. 6, Soto Zen seeks to help people reach an awakened state. We have much to learn about the world and its catastrophes, as well as its beauties, and how they impact our outer world and our inner world. May we consciously learn how to care for these outer and inner worlds and help others to do the same. In helping the world, there are many ways to take action. Some of us are ready to offer nonviolent direct action to disrupt the fossil fuel industry and its funders. Some of us support those who take direct action. Some will meet with MLAs and MPs and city councilors to encourage needed change. All of us have opportunities to engage the people we meet, to listen to what they care about, and then respectfully connecting what they care about to the state of the world in ways relevant to them. Faith groups can work across boundaries to build connection in the human community. And I must say that I have more faith in faith groups than in government. Faith groups care, and we are creatures who care. We care better than we govern. So my practice. I've been very fortunate in this life. In return, I've maintained a long-standing commitment to contribute to social and environmental justice. So what do? I attend mountain range services most Wednesday evenings, Vancouver Quaker meeting on most Sundays. I participate in monthly prayer meditation circle meetings on Burnaby Mountain and in demonstrations focused on climate and social justice, which occur across time. In 2014, I was arrested, blocking a coal train with 12 others in White Rock, and later that year for crossing a line at Burnaby Mountain. In 2019, I gave one evening sessions that I called eco-resilience workshops to help people express their thinking, their feeling, and their plans for how to address collapse. Since 2020, I have facilitated or co-facilitated 4 eco-sattva training groups. These are it's an 8-session program of Buddhist teachers who are particularly focused on ecological and social aspects of the crises we face. I have 3 recommendations for you. I'll pick up one of them. One, I strongly recommend you keep a personal journal, noting what seems to be important that day. I do that with this guy. With each entry, I also note my personal mission statement, which took me quite a while to develop, months. I always end with a statement of gratitude. Secondly, I've just done this for the last 3 months, and it was really in response to a talk I heard by a poet at Mountain Range Zen. Every weekday morning on Awakening, I've been doing the morning pages. I actually do just 1 page in this book. The official morning pages recommends 3, but I think my journal counts for at least 2. So I put my pen on the page here, in my beautiful green book, pen on the page, and I let it go. And I let whatever pops up out of the pen stay on the page. And it's a way of tapping into what my mind is holding in reserve. 3, I regularly engage in morning silence and meditation. If you want to get started on that, start with just a few minutes, 5 minutes maybe, and work up maybe to 12 or 15 minutes over time. So my advice in regard to that time is don't just do something, sit there. Let's see what time we have. Okay. Okay, we got time. I was asked by the organizers whether I was going to connect to something Unitarian. So I've already mentioned the idea that everything's connected. I've mentioned a lot of values that Unitarians share, but I didn't mention my biological connection. My brother is a Unitarian. And let's see, what we need is, Christian, can we have the photo of the church? Here's the photo of a special Unitarian church in Transylvania, Romania. It's the partner of the church of my brother's Unitarian church, not in Transylvania, but in Pennsylvania. In 1613, this became the first church in the world to have Unitarian in its name. So it's very special. So with that, I want to wish you, my brother's influence, Yo no pat Kívánok, which means, I wish you a good day in Hungarian. That's, in that part of Transylvania, Hungarian is the language. So thank you very much for listening, and it's time for your questions and comments. Thank you.
Fred, thank you so much. And you're welcome to take a seat here. And John, you and I are going to go back and forth, aren't we? What we do next.
Maybe you could just reinforce for the folks who are here that want to ask a question.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit back since I'll be talking a lot. I don't want to take that mask on and off all the time.
Sure, that's fine to do. And we're just waiting a moment to see if there are questions from within the hall and in the chat area as well.
Well, I'll just say, Fred would really like, if you've been to any of these before, you'll know that there's typically a dialogue goes on and up on the stage here between us, the 3 or 4 of us, however many are here. But he'd really like to engage with people, particularly the ones who are here. If you've got a question, he would like to not just answer it, but kind of probe a bit and have a little conversation with you. All right. So if you'd like to ask a question, you'd be welcome. And just if you can hand it to Yvonne.
Question or a comment or
Just something, yeah.
thought? I really like connecting to people.
You can ask him that.
It's an online question, John.
Okay. Yeah. So if you'd like to, if you're willing to do that, come up and have a conversation with Fred, please do. Just write your question on paper you can get from Yvonne. They're on the chairs there with your name. Give them to Yvonne and she'll bring them up. Meanwhile, to get things started, online question from Mina.
From whom?
A woman named Mina.
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 Nina or Mina?
M.
M.
Yeah.
Hello, Mina.
Is this hostile atmosphere from government and law enforcement against land protectors? How does one not feel despair and continue to fight?
So let me see if I get this question correct. Given the hostility to land protectors,
Right.
who are protecting the land,
Think the Western.
they're encountering rough and unfair treatment from the police.
Right.
Well,
So how do you avoid? She's saying how we know that, we see it, we hear about it, we may even have experienced it. How do we avoid despair and continue to fight in those circumstances? What?
how to handle that?
Yeah.
Well, don't be surprised, but I think one of the best things you can do is to treat any other human being as a human being. So I have been arrested. I was treated quite gently, as a matter of fact. I am a white male, and so I don't even know what it's like to not be a white male. But I think, one, this has been going on a long time, mistreatment of people who are advocating, who are standing up for healthy, good values. It's been going on a very long time. So I would say, try not to be intimidated. Treat the person, the cop, as a human being, and claim your space, but claim it in a humane, gentle way. The world is not a fair place. Being privileged for a long time, for decades, I thought the world was a fair place. I thought one should be fair, but it's not. The world is not a fair place. And it comes out especially when groups pit themselves one against another. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that at Ferry Creek. We're seeing that at Burnaby Mountain. We're seeing it in the north with the disrespecting the hereditary chiefs. I can't remember the Wet'suwet'en, yes. Yeah. So we're going to have that. There are no guarantees. But you pick what you're led to do and do it in the way that you think is best. Be true to yourself and be as compassionate to everybody. That's what I would say.
Mm. Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Fred, you used the term climate collapse. So the question is, from a faith, a spiritual point of view, What happens if we allow ourselves to accept the fact that this will be a fact, that it will collapse? Let's look right into the darkness of it. How do we view that? How do we respond in terms of our own mental health and well-being? What then by staring into it?
Well, we don't know. Even the IPCC, which is very constrained by politics and governments, their reports have been constrained for a long time. No one knows how it's going to unfold. We know that we're headed in the wrong direction. We know that putting CO2 in the sky is not only it's stupid and it's insane. And it actually, what's amazing is that the oil industry must think they live on another planet, but they don't. So we are headed for major trouble. And the forecasts have been dire in the future, but we have seen here significant damage locally. So it's here. We are sitting in a very privileged place. And one of the things that privilege, I've come to the conclusion, is that privilege is a handicap. It's a serious handicap in understanding the way the world works. So I would say we're going in the wrong direction. I would urge people to look at two articles that appeared today in The Guardian that I saw, and they talk about the carbon bombs that are being planned and manufactured. Bombs, knowing that we have only this much CO2 we can put into the sky, and yet the plans are for multiples of that. So one of the things I really like about Buddhism is that it has an idea of don't know mind. And I try to refer to that in meditation. By letting go of things, you gain some strength in not holding on to your ideas and feelings, but just being there. And we're definitely going in the wrong direction. There's no question about that. And people are lying. People are mismanaging this country. How many people here know that this is a petrostate, or agree with me, I should say? This is a petrostate. It is tied not to what the science says, but to putting more natural gas, harvesting more natural gas, digging more oil wells, et cetera, supporting what's the tar sands, which is a very, very destructive form of oil. So we know we're going in the wrong direction, but how it will unfurl, we don't know.
Let me just pick up on your point, because if you use the example, if I understand it, of meditation and letting go, then my fear about where we're headed, if I approach it from that point of view, I acknowledge the fear, and in a sense, in the acknowledgement of it, is it freeing? Does that let me go? Or
No. It doesn't mean letting go of feelings.
Yeah.
Your feeling of fear is powerful.
Yes.
You want that. People run away from fear. Mm-hmm. There are very few people who are brave enough to say, I am fearful. Mm-hmm. When I read this article today, I was fearful. Mm-hmm. Fear is good. Mm-hmm. It's real. Mm. And what meditation can do is help you be there with your fear, not run away from it. To be there with it.
Right, and finally, linking back to, give those to John, linking back to denial when you're mentioning oil companies or those who aren't prepared to accept that's an avoidance too, is it not? As in the tobacco industry, that
Well, there are people who actually, I think, are quite malignant, who know what the science says and just decide that it's not in their interest to believe it. And I would call them psychopathic. People who are very bright, are very capable of managing complex situations, and who are pushing us in the wrong way. And what I don't understand, now part of this is herd behavior. You know, here we are, we tend to be on the same page, and we tend to reinforce one another. If we were part of an oil company, we'd be on the same page, a very different page than one we're on now. But we would tend to reinforce one another. We are social primates. One of the sayings, well, okay. So I would say that meditation doesn't mean just being cool no matter what. It means being with who you are and allowing that to be for that period of time. And it means paying attention to what's going on. One of the things that we're handicapped by is that we can think and we can imagine. So we live in 8 billion universes. Our species lives in 8 billion universes, but there's only one universe out there. And it gets dealt to us 1 second at a time. And if we can somehow connect with that and be who we are in that second, in this universe, you can't do more than that. And as long as you're true to yourself.
sure.
Can I follow up on that? Because you talked about facing your fear earlier.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the same kind of thing facing, for me personally, my grief at the world we're losing.
Yes.
And would you say that, in a sense, both of those things are generated by my mind, that meditation kind of get me some space from? Like I'm imagining something, I'm fearful of something I'm imagining. And the meditation helps you be present rather than in the future where my thoughts are taking me. Or in the past where my memories are taking me.
But also, I know from knowing you a bit that for a long time you have been connected to nature ever since you were young.
Right.
And what you know is that it's under attack and it's being undermined and destroyed. And how you could not feel grief at that, I don't know. I think you have to feel grief at that. And to allow yourself to feel that grief and to share that grief is, I think, a healthy thing to do.
So perhaps maybe what you're getting at is that we shouldn't avoid our fear or our grief.
No.
And that maybe is what is holding people back from action. They don't want to face the grief. They don't want to face the fears. Would you say anything about that?
I think people widely know that we're in big, big trouble. Certainly people who've lost jobs know that they're in desperate trouble now. But people whose jobs aren't at risk know that we and this planet and life is in very serious trouble.
Well, there's just some...
And what to do is a matter of allowing that, somewhat like when a Quaker gets up to speak, allow that to come from a voice inside. To not rush into it, to let that emerge, but not to run away from it. The other thing is that your fear is very well founded. It's real. The people who are pretending that we're not in crisis are much less realistic than the people who are fearful, who feel their fear, not the people who don't feel their fear. today, after reading those 2 articles, I needed to talk to somebody. I had to talk to somebody. I needed to talk to somebody. So I called 3 people, and it helped.
All right, I have a question here from Samir.
Would you like to come up?
Oh.
It'd be wonderful to have you up here.
Yeah, and his question are, apart from the speaker series, can you talk about some other examples of positive and effective actions you've seen congregations or different faith traditions take to help move the needle on the climate issue?
And it can be any kind of action, like, whether mobilizing people to...
Samir?
Oh,
So the people online can hear you?
sure. And it can be any range of actions, from encouraging people to make better choices for the planet or vote in ways that, for politicians that are going to move the needle on this. Yeah, just across the board.
I think that it's important to recognize how serious this is and to realize how trapped we are into a system that is going in the wrong direction. How much of our food is oil-based and has been for a long time. And how our politicians are actually not leaders, but followers, and often have been bought out one way or another. So we're in difficulty. So I think we're in this is a tough situation. I think the reality is harsh. And we're very privileged here. We don't have any idea, any feeling for what it's like for the people in the Ukraine, for the people in various parts of the world that are oppressed. So I think we have to face the world that we're in, and there's a lot of difficult news in that world. So I would say, I would like you to tell me,
His question was something like,
Yeah.
is mountain range Zen involved in climate action, for example?
yes,
Or your Quaker committee?
yeah.
What sort of, he's looking.
Is that what is that, yes?
Yeah, like...
Okay.
Himself getting into action.
Okay. Well, for example, the prayer circle thing has people of all kinds of faith. I see Jeanette out there who not only has come to the prayer circle for years, but also was a leader of the Hug the Mountain campaign. So there are groups around that are interfaith groups that are taking a position and standing up and saying, this is wrong. Jeanette, it would be wonderful if you came up here and joined us. Because I think you would help out in answering. Yeah, come up.
Jeanette, just take this chair here.
Yeah, bring a chair. Yeah, please stay.
This is what happens when you let Fred in.
The circle gets bigger.
Because the circle gets bigger.
Yes, exactly. Isn't this what it's supposed to do? Where we engage in these conversations and then we inspire one another. It's sort of a catching sort of connection where we weave our ideas and our different faiths together. And it's not so much in a focus of the different places we come to, but where we wish to go to together. And that is a beautiful thread of unity, of what I see here in our Unitarian friends, but also from a Presbyterian myself with those deep roots, but deeply connected in ecumenical justice work through Kairos, in coming together of many churches as one for pursuit of justice and climate justice specifically,
Yep.
is something that we learn to do together. And for me, having been brought up in the Korean minority population in Japan, where I saw my parents work within that minority culture as a Christian in small minority, less than 3%, you learn to walk humbly, and you learn to work together in a united way than trying to separate ourselves because you have this creed and you have that creed, and therefore we shall not meet and work together. You get past that. And climate justice is very much a part of that movement as well.
Would you take your mask off, please? It's hard to understand.
Is it hard?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so, I think it's a constant, stay rooted in your faith, but be curious, be interested in others, and work together and find ways of uniting in the quest. I don't know, what else?
Yeah,
Fred?
I think, I have a mic, it's okay. I think it's very important to work across boundaries. And I try to say that in the first question. How do you handle police who are brutal? You do your best to work across boundaries. But it's also important to find out the reality. The reality is that this is very much going in the wrong direction. And when you see the plans of the fossil fuel industry, it's depressing. That's the world we're in. We can hide from it, but that's my partner's first husband said that if he saw an atomic bomb coming down, he would take a sign that said no and hold it up. And that's what we need. We need to use our wisdom, we need to use our capacity to connect, and we need to not be afraid to do what we're called to do, and to help others to do the same. Our media, I am so disappointed to hear somebody on CBC on a call-in show say, well, that's an environmentalist. No, that's not an environmentalist. That's a citizen who happens to be tuned into reality. If you put that citizen in a box and call them an environmentalist, you're not dealing with reality. We have been hiding from reality.
As it happens, so we've had Fred, and Jeanette was Presbyterian, and she was in the prayer circles and was actually spent 9 days in jail for her efforts, as we heard last time. You were here with the singing. And Samir, you'll get to reprise in a month. You're coming back, talking from an Ishmaeli point of view. I mean, there must be some common teachings or ways of being in the world that that you must share, that sort of point towards being engaged with the world and not, facing your fear, facing your grief, but going on anyway, like you're defending Mariupol from the Russians or something.
Yes. Yeah, the Ukrainians are fighting war, which tends to produce more war. But they were attacked, and they're showing what bravery looks like. They're showing what commitment looks like. And we need to do that, to what we're called to do, because we have been engaged in a war of conquest of nature, and nature wins. So it's time to back off that war and to recognize that we've been at war, that what we're doing now is totally inappropriate in terms of consumption. It's not a matter of getting the right energy, it's a matter of living very differently.
What does your Buddhist or Quaker, I mean, when you spoke about Buddhism, you spoke about a number of principles that maybe help ground you and remind you of that place of being connected,
Both Buddhism and Quaker really focus on simplicity. And we don't need that next this, that next that. We don't need to have food that comes from a great distance. We don't need to have a system where the green beans that are frozen, that are grown in Delta, get shipped to San Francisco and shipped to Chicago and then shipped back to Vancouver, traveling 9,000 kilometers. We don't need that, but we don't pay attention. So we have a lot to learn about everything, our food, our transportation, and where our money goes. The Royal Bank of Canada is one of the major funders of fossil fuel in the world, not in Canada, in the world. That's unacceptable. But how many people know that? Well, and I have money there, and I'm forced to have money because of a route that my pension money from the U.S. travels.
Right.
So, I'm stuck.
So where does your faith traditions help you deal with that stuckness or whatever? I mean, because that could immobilize you, saying, well, I can't do anything because I'll threaten my pension.
Well, what I need to do, I mean, all the major banks, they won't send it to a credit union.
No, I know. But you've got to...
Yeah, it is a problem.
Right.
Do I say to the United States, keep it? I hadn't thought of that. It's an interesting idea.
Well, I'm more interested in the question is that's part of your reality. I mean, you can't change everything. Well, maybe you can.
Yeah.
So you have to accept that. I mean, we all have the same situation. We all, in Canada, if we're not already, we'll at one point benefit from the Canada Pension Plan, which is invested. Well, we could fight that every year, say, okay, I'll do what I need to mobilize myself to do what I can and not worry about the rest, or what?
Okay. I think it's very important to recognize that there's so much going on that, as you just suggested, you can't take it. You can only take one or two things. And you have to figure out what fits with who you are, what you can do with your understanding of reality, and what's important. And then you also have to take care of you. Because I was once on the rescue group, the North Shore Rescue Group, and we practiced on Tuesday nights in some very nasty weather. And at the beginning, the leader said, "Let me see your backpack, because we don't want to be looking for you." So we are all connected. So we pick out what makes sense. The one thing I would say is to realize that we're in deep trouble, that we shouldn't cut off the flow of information, but we shouldn't overdose it. I was a certified doom scroller for a long time, looking at the bad news and getting overwhelmed by it. No. You have to figure out how to balance inside and outside, and then appreciate what we have. Even this world has a lot of beauty in it, And we have to celebrate that. There are a lot of wonderful people who celebrate that. So I don't have any nice answers. But I think if we deal with reality, I would say, if we live in this world as it is, I would say that, and do the best we can, you can't ask for more.
Fred, we're getting towards our time here. I wanted to just go back to your early activism with the tobacco industry and ask, what we're dealing with is of even larger scale, but are there lessons that you took from your activism in the tobacco industry?
Yes, yes. Okay,
Please
I'll give you
expand on
one.
that, yeah.
First of all, if a behavior doesn't make sense, like a professor of pathology standing in front of doctors and smoking, this is like the 1970s, after the Surgeon General's report, a 4-pack-a-day pathologist talking to doctors and smoking before that seems crazy. But if you see behavior that doesn't make sense, you probably don't understand it. That's one of the take-home messages. And when you understand that there are basic biological differences in tobacco addiction and cigarette addiction, really basic, serious, then you understand that that person's taking care of themselves. Okay, anyway, so another is if you see a major change in population behavior, in this world that we live in, look for corporate-driven behavior. Corporations have enormous power now, and so that's one thing. But in terms of people, one of the major things that I would help doctors with is don't just deal with the people who are ready to make change. You have different things you do with different levels of smoking. You have the person who's not ready to stop smoking and says, no, I don't want to stop smoking. That person actually has a better chance of stopping smoking when they decide to, because that person is not going like, oh, I wish I could stop smoking. Oh, this is a terrible thing I'm doing to myself. So in other words, you have different things. You recognize that there are different ways of talking to people, and you talk with everybody. And very few people are ready to make changes at one time. The smokers, after the Surgeon General's report, in this province, the maximum was 20%. Usually it was like 8 to 12%. So there's a lot of work to do, and if you are slightly successful with 80% of the population, you may be doing more good than helping those who already have momentum. Now, the other thing is, the other thing is we need information across the population. If we were selling anything in this, we would have information about people's preferences, about how they want things, what they like, what they don't like, what they would spend, etc., what they take seriously, it's called marketing. But it's also understanding the population. And one of the things that I would like to see happen is for the Pew Foundation, which sponsors all kinds of research, including research about religious groups and even political behavior of religious groups. I would like to see the Pew Foundation really gather information that tells us about where various faith groups are and how they, more specifics within faith groups, and what are the barriers and what are the things that people want to do, et cetera, et cetera. So to summarize that, what I learned from tobacco, that behavior makes sense, that people really are different, but you deal differently with different people, that there's a lot of corporate-driven behavior, and that you really need to get population-level information to understand what's going on.
That is instructive. Are there any other questions or comments? Because we probably should be drawing two.
No, but we
Oh,
were
I
sort
don't-
of, they might take us off on a tangent rather than, so.
Okay.
Did we,
One
Yes, please do.
maybe shorter follow-up question. What kind of questions would you like to see the peer group collecting that could help, faith leaders or activists in general more effectively talk to the different groups of people about climate change?
well, certainly, I'm not involved in that. I haven't spent time looking at the various stages. There are about 6 categories of attitudes that I know. The Yale has a group that categorizes populations and looks at how those things change. So I would say it really, so where is your congregation? Where are they in awareness? What do they want to do? What do they perceive needs to be done? And I must say that at this point I have to bring forth my don't know mind. I'm not prepared to really give you a good answer to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did we answer your question?
Oh, she was bringing me cards.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Oh, okay.
There was one more, and I think the answer to this is yes.
The
It's
answers.
kind of straightforward, it's what you talked about already.
Yeah, but again, for me now, are you recommending that we build a circle of allies for mutual support?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, we are social creatures, and it's very important to connect to people about the subject, people you can talk with. Absolutely. It's fine to have a one evening gathering like this, but the next step is to have people that you can go to and talk to, and then maybe do things with. So absolutely.
yeah. Well, I know within our own congregation here, we are a very dynamic environment team. So, we take on a variety of issues, particularly, whatever happens to be moving, certainly Trans Mountain and fish farming and some other, things come up. But whatever, they are a group that I can talk to if I want to. Like you said, you had to call 3 people today. You just had to.
Yes.
Well, there's 3 people I could call if I needed to. They would know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And if we could do that across faith groups too, then maybe the multi-faith
So
group could help with that.
So I will make connection with you, and we'll exchange contact information. I'll be here when you talk next month, and that's the least I can do.
Sounds like a good start.
Perfect. We're starting to model the process, aren't we? Joan's going to give you a more formal thanks, Fred, in a moment. And thanks for joining us, too.
Okay.
Here.
Yes.
That was wonderful.
And some-
But I just...
Jeanette, please introduce yourself. Well, I'll
Sure.
introduce
You,
you.
you introduced Jeanette. I should have, yes.
If you come on, you can do better than I can.
Fred and I go way back. And we have a lot of things in common that I learned tonight. Not only are we both epidemiologists and concerned about the population health approach, but the addiction to smoking that puts you into public health, the addiction to car usage is where I'm working in the transportation sector and concerned about that addiction to oil, and that we need to change our ways and start accessing public transit better and looking at multimodal ways of getting around. And how do we do it? Well, convenience, time are our 2 things that we tend to rely on and attribute to our independence. And that is our privilege, and that's our greed, and that's our ways of getting around. And we're pressed for time, we tend to hop in our cars. So how do we get around more environmentally sound and responsibly, and stay connected with one another is a continuous challenge that I'm pursuing in my work. Thank you.
And
Well-
you work for
Oh, Better Environmentally Sound Transportation. It's a small
Be- be-
NGO.
Best.
Best, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I just two or three things that struck me in the exchange this evening, which, like all of them, was very rich. Important to acknowledge our fears. And also, we don't know how things are going to turn out. And it's important to keep that in mind, that we don't become immobilized, that as Fred said, no one knows how it will unfold. And it's important to take care of ourselves, as you suggested, maintaining a personal journal, as you do. And then you mentioned the morning paper. Can you talk about just a moment about that and just how we would connect with it?
Okay. A long time ago, I came across a book called The Artist's Way. And I don't remember the name. Anybody know the name of the person who wrote The Artist's Way? A woman who...
Anne Cameron?
Okay, Anne Cameron, okay. It's called The Artist's Way, and the morning pages, I started to do it, and then I gave it up. And what I discovered recently is what I do is I meditate for a minute and a half. I put my pen down on the page. I meditate, so I, don't think of anything, and then start writing. And after my phone says 100 seconds has passed, and that's very kind of tells me where I am back there, or wherever it is. So I find that helpful, and I also like it. I like it. I have a cup of coffee afterwards.
Surprise.
It's called behavioral reinforcement. Right? So the journal, I think, is a way of kind of finding that you navigate your life. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I do in the journaling is I look back at the previous entry, whether it was yesterday or 6 months ago, and I make a comment about it. Mm-hmm. So that way I'm kind of weaving my life on paper. And the morning pages gets the back of my head, and then the meditation is just being there.
The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who was in the camps,
Yes,
I draw a lot from him.
yes.
And his insight about who survived mentally in the camps and who did not, even if they physically survived. And he felt that there was an inner decision that no matter how difficult the circumstances, each resident worked to take that enabled them to cope in some way that led to their survival. In a sense, we're feeling the same kind of threat these days, aren't we? So when we link it back to how your illustration of how you're managing with those three aspects of your morning, is that not an example of how each of us try to make our own decision and not become immobilized in the way that Frankl was talking about?
Right. His book, Man's Search for Meaning,
Yes.
is very valuable.
Yeah.
And in fact, heaven would be a terrible place to be because it'd be so boring after about the first week, right? So
Right.
meaning involves challenge, right? Solving something, being there, seeing things evolve. Yeah. So that's a very important book, and that's a very helpful thing to say, I think.
John.
Well, just in closing, thanks, Fred. I thought we'd have an interesting and somewhat unpredictable evening, and we have. Thanks to your irrepressible intellect and curiosity and the way you range around thoughts in the world. It's been great. So thanks again for that.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for doing this. It's a very important thing to do.
Yeah.
And I hope you continue it. And I hope that that somehow the activist component of your congregation can connect with other congregations. And maybe this series can move in that direction.
Well, we'll see. And just a reminder, as Michael said at the start, our next, our last session for this season will be on the on May the 8th.
June.
June the 8th, yeah. And as luck would have it, Samir Merchant will be here speaking from the Ismaili point of view, and I'm looking forward to that.
And may I just interrupt because you are here. Having heard what you have this evening, Samir, and thank you for coming, can you give us a preview of what you're thinking about, how you might approach your presentation next month?
Sure, I just took off my mic, so let me put this back on. I think, so the gist of what I will be talking about next month is the importance of taking some action. I believe that individual action is not sufficient to fix the problem, but it is a necessary step, even if just for our own mental health, for giving us a sense of agency. And then collectively, it can have an impact, but a lot of it is, you set an example for other people. You can take actions at what I've seen referred to as the level 3 actions, where you're taking actions, at like your kid's school or within your city, a place where you are either known or you can get meetings with someone in charge. And there you're able to effect change and also set examples for other like schools or other cities. So that's kind of the high level idea of what I want to talk about.
It's a nice transition as the last presentation in our series to be able to move into what next? What do we do?
Yep.
That's it.
I think we're done.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
you for being
Jeanette.
here, and
Good
for
to
all of
see
you
you
who
all,
are-
and thanks for all the help in putting it
Who
together.
watched us tonight or will
Thank you.
watch us during the week.
That's great.